Hello, Maja. So nice to have you here at the Infinity Bliss Dance Festival. We would like to know a little about you. Can you tell us, please?
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a physician, neuroscientist, who teaches at the medical school of the University of Ljubljana, and I discovered dance 5 years ago. It led me to research it and also to explore learning dancing, which brought me here.
Oh, great. What is actually the impact on our brain when we dance?
Brain learns from dancing, and it is reshaped through dancing. Basically, all the key networks in the brain are affected by dancing. If dancing is connected to music, all of our brain is engaged in it. It trains our sensory motor system, it trains our emotional system, it trains our memory, and it engages us in new ways to be creative. So it actually is an excellent, as we like to say, cognitive practice for people of all ages, because through dancing we really learn new tricks and teach our brain how to execute them.
So powerful, and we can actually reshape our brain through dance.
We literally do, yes.
So nice. And what about the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, and how does the arts of music and dance connect? Can you explain a little about that?
It is one of the favorite myths about the brain, which is hardwired into our communication nowadays, that the brain is sharply divided into two hemispheres, and that they are somehow complementary but quite different and cover different functions. But this is the remnant of the old understanding of how the brain does its work, and it is based on actually something we today view as a misunderstanding of the way the brain works. It turns out that very much of what we can do depends on very strong interactions between the two hemispheres. And even though there are functional hubs in these parallel networks that essentially are the brain, that are more pronounced on the left side and others on the right side, you can really view them more as parts of spider's web, hubs, the crossings in the spider's web, which are critical for the whole web to be as capable of catching flies in that case, right? But capable of executing and instantiating all the functions that a human organism can perform. So the division into the left and the right side of the brain is something that I hope we will slowly let go.
So, Maja, thank you for helping us understand that. Thank you so much. And I was curious also to learn about how stress affects our brain and how is it visible and the impacts it has on our brain. Can you explain on that?
We tend to use the word stress without specifically defining what we mean by that. And there are different kinds of stress. There is something that we can call positive stress. For example, when we are in love, we are in a state of stress, but many of our cognitive and physical functions are enhanced through this special state that our body comes to function under stress. And then there are the negative stress sides or effects, and negative stress can affect the body, again, not just in one way, but depending on how intense and how long it lasts, it can have different effects. And there is another aspect of how the stress can affect us, and that's when we are exposed to it in terms of the developmental stage that we are at. For example, in early childhood, certain aspects of a chronic stress, such as neglect, even more than abuse, tend to leave a very long-lasting damage to our ability to acutely respond to new stressors in life. Because our ability to mount a full stress response, which is essentially in favor of survival, is hampered, it's weakened. There are also effects of stress that happens, for example, later in life, and also tends to be chronic, for example, which on the other hand lead to not a weakened stress response, but rather to a continuously enhanced response to stress. And then our reserve to face new challenges with a proper stress response is diminished. These different situations tend to leave different marks on the brain. But overall, if we can just try to be succinct and not too long, the short-term positive stress is a good thing. It is essentially something that challenges us to respond with our nervous system, with our hormonal system, to face future challenges more successfully. On the other hand, any chronic stress, early in life or later, is something that exhausts the brain and changes its structure and function in such a fashion that we are overall weakened by it.
Okay, I would be interested, if I may, to ask you one last question, which is regarding how do you think the practice of mindfulness can help in developing that stress response be more positive?
Mindfulness has been tested and validated as a strategy or technique that helps us alleviate the effects of stress on the brain and body. And of course, those people who are more versed in practicing it reap the most benefits. But even just a short time after we begin to practice mindfulness, you can actually see that we respond to stressful situations better, that we are better at dealing with challenges in everyday life on a behavioral level. And there are many things that had been looked into in terms of what happens in the brain. I am not very privy to all the studies that had looked into that. But I do know that the ways that we mount an emotional response is different. Yeah. And those effects of the negative stress that we talked about before can also be measurably reduced.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Maja, for sharing your knowledge with us and your wisdom, and thank you for being here.
You're most welcome.